Meeting. If you'll join me for the opening prayer and pledge. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. We'll move to the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
First, is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next we'll move to citizens' comments. Do you have any citizens' comments? No citizens' comments tonight? Thank you. Next, we'll go to approval of minutes from the February 13th, 2018 regular meeting.
Move to approve.
First,
Second.
second,
I just have a small comment on the opening prayer and pledge. We just need to make sure that that says that Butler led it.
all right, you got that, Micah? Good. All right, any additional notes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will move into new business. Item 1, revision to final plat, Whispering Wind subdivision, 15 proposed lots on 10.47 acres, property located along Cumberland Drive, tax map 47, parcel 67.01, R20 zoning district, property owned by Walt Toddy. Good evening, Mr. Toddy. We do have some staff comments on that. Get Mr. Jenkins to read them for me.
Sir. Several minor adjustments were made from the previously approved final plat, and there are no new technical staff comments pertaining to this revised final plat. As a side note, relative to discussion on required open space brought up earlier today, the Planning Commission held lengthy discussion in July of 2017 regarding this requirement and previously approved the subdivision without an open space component.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Move to approve.
Go first,
Second.
second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Toddy.
Thank you.
Move to item 2. New business, revision to site plan Subway Restaurant, 2.16 acres, property located along Highway 96 North, tax map 18, parcel 18, commercial general zoning district, property owned by Prakash Patel. Is that correct? Good evening. Could you state your name for me?
Trent Smith. I'm a civil engineer.
Thank you, sir. We do have some staff comments. Would you get Mr. Jenkins to read them in for me?
The Planning Commission previously approved a site plan for Subway in July of 2017. The applicant has since changed his development plans to include a standalone Subway restaurant with a drive-through window, as well as a small retail strip building. The newly provided color elevations meet the city's design review requirements. There are no new technical staff comments pertaining to the revised site plan.
Thank you, sir. Have any questions for the applicant?
Where it says dining next to the drive-through, that's really back of the house, right? Not dining area. Because this is your dining edge, right? And that's the back of the house? Okay, just checking.
I had to look at that. That's architectural, which is, architect's supposed to be here with me.
Pass the buck.
You know, just making sure you weren't making people eat in the cooler.
On the small retail strip building, is it on this picture,
Pardon me?
on the plat?
Well, the strip center portion of it is actually future phase. What we're looking for is approval of phase one, which is pretty specific to the standalone subway.
Mr. Power, sheet C 2.0 would be probably the clearest one that shows the extents of the first phase.
A lot of plans in our packet.
Yeah, so what she's got on the screen up there.
There we go.
Okay.
This is phase one in the front section there, and the other site would be on the back side, phase two. So the parking suffice and everything for the phase one for,
Just as a commentary, the fire department did require them to add the fire hydrant. That would really be necessary for the later phases as part of phase one, so that they wouldn't have to disturb the asphalt at a later date. So they went ahead and did that.
Move to approve.
first,
Second.
second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Cali was the second. Item 3, new business. Final plat, Pepper Tree Cove subdivision, Phase 2, 6 proposed lots on 2.10 acres. Property located along Horn Tavern Drive, tax map 22, part of parcel 15, RS 15 PUD zoning district, property owned by Duke and Duke LLC. Mr. Ingram? We do not have any staff comments on this particular item. Any questions for the applicant?
And phase one has already been approved, correct?
Yes, phase one. Just to give you a little brief history for those of y'all that may not know, when this PUD was originally approved, it was a 47-lot PUD. And then we came back a few months later and amended that to 55 lots because we had acquired 2 additional pieces of property that we had more or less developed around those. We didn't amend the PUD until we had began construction on the original phase one.
Okay.
We gained 8 lots by acquiring those 2 additional pieces of property. So the infrastructure that was originally approved, that we have the bond on, that infrastructure was installed according to the original plan. So the infrastructure for these 6 lots is already there.
Okay.
It was put in with the original phase one. So that's why this is only a 6-lot approval, because the infrastructure is already there.
And the weird little shaped lot 8, that's buildable? It's got enough setbacks
It
and
is,
stuff?
yes.
I figured you had already researched that.
Any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mangrum, if you don't mind, it says here on the plans that open space and Pepper Tree Cove subdivision phase 1 is in the plat book. What are your current plans for that open space over there? And is it large enough to suffice for the additional lots you're adding here?
Yes, I don't remember our exact, I could look it up pretty quick. But I want to say the requirement was 10%.
Correct.
I think we were at 14 or 15% because our open space didn't change. We didn't, by changing the 8 lots, we just, the first, from what you see now, from 29, 19, 8, and 47, the only thing that changed was from there to Horn Tavern. Everything in the back remained the same. We didn't interfere with any of the previously approved open space.
And it's just as accessible to the people in this part of the community for this phase as the previous community?
Yes.
Okay, great. And what do you plan on doing with that open space? Any
We're
sort of
gonna
like
leave
a
it
playground
natural.
or?
We're gonna leave it as natural as we can leave it, just to give it buffer from other adjoining properties. So if
Okay.
they don't develop or do develop down the road, it gives them a natural buffer. Now, there is, in phase one, there is a common area that, pavilion's gonna be built there. fire pit. It has its own parking area just for those amenities.
So you would say that there's a place there for, let's say, families and neighborhood kids to go and be without having to run the streets and go down to the Bowie Nature Park or something like that. They can do something there in their community.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Would you like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
First,
Second.
second, Ms. Slaughter. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you, Mr. Magrum.
Thank you.
Item 4. Conceptual improvement size development plan, Kenny Taylor subdivision, 6 proposed lots on 8.25 acres, property located at 7312 Taylor Road, tax map 42, parcel 76 and 77.08, 8.25 acres, RS 40 zoning district, property owned by Kenny Taylor. And we do have some staff comments. Mr. Jenkins, would you read them for me?
Yes, sir. At the discretion of the Planning Commission, improvements may include a 5-foot sidewalk, curb and gutter, and additional asphalt width to provide minimum drive lanes of 12 feet wide.
Sir? Any questions for the applicant?
I do have a question,
Sir?
and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and I apologize that I don't. We have another project coming up, which is Otter Creek, which is asking for a annexation. How close is this going to be to that, as far
It
as?
adjoins it.
It adjoins it. And I guess there's a question for Kristen. If we do sidewalks here, would it actually meet up with any sidewalks that would be requested or are proposed with Otter Creek?
No, sir. This frontage does not meet up to any frontage that is part of the Otter Creek project.
So we would just have a sidewalk in the middle of nowhere?
Correct.
Okay.
And just as an additional side note, portion, probably the southern 2/3, basically 5 through 1. While the frontage is contained within the city limits, the road itself is still in the county. So it would be rather difficult to make them install sidewalks when it's not on city right of way.
And I assume the same would go for adding extra asphalt and those things?
Right, correct.
What's the current road width? Like 10-foot lanes? Even?
Probably on that plat if we can blow it up.
Plat scales to 22 feet of total road width, so 2 11-foot lanes.
Okay.
Questions?
Just more an acknowledgement than anything at this point. So I see here you're requesting a variance for the minimum lot width on the front ends to be reduced to 125 feet for lots 5 and 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's
We-
a Board of Zoning Appeals issue?
We had
at that
asked for
point?
this to be rezoned because a portion of the property that's behind this has already been rezoned to R20. We were ultimately denied that rezoning request.
Yeah.
And these lots are still all 5 of the new lots. I'm not counting lot 6 because it's existing. But lots 1 through 5 are still over an acre or better. So we're still technically in the R40 square footage. We just can't quite meet the 150-foot width at the building setback to accomplish to stay in the R40 zone. So we're just asking for the variance, which is, the variance we're asking for is dead in the middle of an R20 or an R40 zoning. So R20 is 100-foot width, and this is, an R40 is 150, so we are asking for that variance.
Thank you. And then for the staff, is that a variance that we could approve here, or is that something that has to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals?
It's a requirement that's contained within the zoning ordinance, so it does have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and he is on the April 2nd Board of Zoning Appeals agenda.
So if we were to approve this plan today, it would have to be contingent upon the Board of Zoning Appeals?
This
That-
is just there's one more step in this approval. This is just the development plan, which is more of a preliminary step. Then he would do construction plans, which are approved in-house, and then a final plat. So should the Board of Zoning Appeals decide that they don't want to grant the variance, he'd have time to revise for the final plat submittal, which would come back before you.
Okay.
Can you explain again why we are not going to have sidewalks and curb and gutter on it?
Of course, it's always up to, the will of the planning commission, but in this instance, as far as the curb and gutter, the remainder of Taylor Road does not have curb and gutter, so that would probably cause some drainage issues. Additionally, the sidewalks, there's no sidewalk network on Taylor Road, so you would basically have sidewalks in front of 6 lots only. And then additionally, the frontage of lots 5 through 1 is actually contained in the county. When they annexed that parcel, they only annexed the property. They didn't annex the county road as well, so it'd be difficult. We'd have to coordinate with the county to have a sidewalk project be approved because it's in their jurisdiction.
Is that something that's never done?
I've never personally experienced it. It probably could be done. Again,
Our objective, long-term objective is to have curbs and gutters and sidewalks for safety of the community. So how often are we going to have to back up and not do that just because we have a narrow road?
it just depends. Honestly, I think it's probably, I think outside of the county issue, I think it's more important the fact that we're talking about an 800 feet section here, so you'd literally be putting curb and gutter and sidewalks in front of 6 lots.
I understand
Which would
that,
just-
but you still would have sidewalks to go visit 5 other neighbors, that's my opinion.
Sure.
I think too, the biggest thing is like when you have a city road, you have a city right of way. And so that sidewalk gets included into that city right of way. That wouldn't exist now. So it's kind of a gray area of who maintains it, who upkeeps it when it breaks and things like that. So it's kind of just a hard transition.
Hypothetically speaking, if we approve this without sidewalks right now, do we have some sort of a sidewalk fee that we could then dig into to put in sidewalks later once Fairview would hypothetically annex that portion of the road, or another subdivision was added near it or something like that, to where we'd actually need sidewalks?
Not currently, but that is something that has been discussed in the past, to my understanding, and it is something that staff is looking at, and I'm sure we will discuss that in the future as we go forward and with revising our books.
Yes, sir.
Because it's a county right of way, she's absolutely right, we would have to reach an agreement with the county, but this board could not order sidewalks since it's not in city property. At best, what you could do, and this is for your consideration, is require that sidewalks and gutters be put in place if an agreement is reached with the county. So it'd have to be contingent upon that. And that agreement would have to address who maintains it. It'd be up to Fairview and the county to decide how that would be done. But that's gonna have to be something separate from this body.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I'd personally just like to have some sort of a solution before we just approve it for the sidewalks. Do we say, hey, you should put them in and be able to have easy access to your neighbors who are 5 doors down from you without walking on the road? Or do we say, well, let's go ahead and try to come up with a fee of some sort that you can, pay us in place that we can use later on? I see Mr. Collins is not a fan of that.
No, sir, Scott Collins, city manager. No, sir, not necessarily not a fan, just kind of want to let you know the hurdles of those. Before this body could impose a fee, if there was a fee done, that fee would have to be established by ordinance by the Board of Commissioners. The Planning Commission does not have the authority to establish a fee or a code on behalf of the city. So that's issue number one. Not that that hasn't been discussed, and there's some effort to get that done. However, it's just a little cumbersome. There's some interest in it. It's just how do we make that work? Secondly, the issue of the roadway itself being in the county is the city, under the law, doesn't have the provision to enforce or require the installation of those sidewalks. If we were to enforce or require the installation of those sidewalks, the city doesn't have the legal authority to maintain them because it's not a city right-of-way. So in effect, we would, let's say there was an issue with that sidewalk, the request of the city would be to dispatch employees to private property to maintain or make work or repairs on that, and we can't legally enforce that work. So there are some, again, just simple hurdles within that one. It's kind of odd. It's on a county road, and that's where it sets up. The reality is on this one, we just don't have a way to properly manage or enforce the process of the sidewalks themselves.
Okay, thank you. And then just for simple clarification, to return that back to you. So, and what I'm hearing right now is that us as a planning commission are attempting to enforce a regulation that we have no ability to enforce.
Correct. What, I say attempting, no, sir, I don't think you're attempting to. I think the discussion's healthy. I think it's just a process to get through. I believe that if the Board of Commissioners were to assess a fee for these things, then the right step in that would be for the Board of Commissioners to adopt or assess some fee, regulation, whatever the case may be, and then the Planning Commission simply adopt that regulation as a part of the subdivision regulations. Then you would have a subdivision regulation that worked in concert with the municipal code, and then in fact, it would be enforceable as a fee that will be standardized.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Additional questions? I'd like to make a motion.
Motion to approve with the variance allowing that there not be sidewalks with curb and gutter on this project.
So we got a first.
I'll second it.
Callie, second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Mangrum.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item 5. Final plat Scarborough Place subdivision, Phase 3, 11 proposed lots on 2.23 acres. Property located along Scarborough Place, tax map 42G, Group B, Parcel 4, R20 PUD zoning district, property owned by Thomas Smithson. You could state your name for me.
Thomas Smithson.
Smithson? Excellent. We do have some staff comments here. Mr. Jenkins, if you could read those in for me.
Sure. Staff recommends that final plat approval be contingent upon the submittal of an as-built survey prior to the recording of this plat. Typically, the city would require that when the posted bond amount is requested to be released and the improvements are to be formally accepted by the city. However, the city is currently holding a bond in the amount of $52,000 for a plat that was approved back in March of 2008. Without having updated construction plans, the requirement to submit an as-built survey would assist in verifying that appropriate easements are provided for and that the proposed lots are suitable for development with regards to drainage and utilities.
Sir? Any questions for the applicant?
Are you talking about redoing the as-built? Because this was put in quite a few years ago. The structure of all this. So I don't,
Anyone on staff speak to that? It sounds like maybe they just want it updated since it's been in place since 2008, so they're trying to get an updated as-built. Rowan?
Has, Has the entirety of the road and stormwater infrastructure all the way to the end of the cul-de-sac, has that been installed? And if so, approximately when was that installed?
Well, that was installed last year,
Okay,
the roads. The sewer and water all was put in and the manholes were set. And the grading was done quite a while ago. Then we finished up last year.
so the rough grading and the utility lines were installed 2007, 8, 9, 10 range. This mic is really loud.
We hear you good.
And the actual road infrastructure and the stormwater infrastructure has been installed within the last 12 months, is that?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And that's my primary concern is, I want, as you know, the city doesn't own the utilities, that's Water Authority. So while those may have been installed in 2008, that's great. They may or may not have accepted them, we'll leave that in their jurisdiction. But as far as the road improvements and the stormwater infrastructure, staff would like to see as-bills on the actual road infrastructure and the stormwater stuff, so that we can verify that what was installed within the last 12 months is actually in accordance with what was approved back in 2008. Because the last thing we want to do is end up with a portion of a roadway that is actually falls maybe outside of the recorded right-of-way area, and now we're dealing with a portion of road that may be on private property. And we can avoid all that by going on and having as-bills, reviewed and submitted at this time before a plat's recorded, so that we can make sure we have accommodated all appropriate. Road that was constructed is actually within the right-of-way boundaries that were recorded back in 2008.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
The Middle Tennessee come in and they put the electrical right where one of the drains went, and I come in and showed them what we had, and they said that was fine. We had to move the drain down one lot, and that's the only thing would change from the original plan.
I think too, and just confirming placement would be correct and things. Does that answer your question of
Yeah, I
trying to-
mean, I can get it done.
Okay, excellent. Any additional questions?
Mr. Smithson, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I was just looking at your common space on here, and it's right next to the highway, and I'm just curious to know what your plans are for the open space of the common space there. And then, is there any sort of barrier or buffer to keep, if kids are playing in that common space, to keep them from venturing over into the highway?
Well, I'm just gonna give it to give me.
Oh, please, yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna give it to the homeowners, and see, it was a lot that somehow wound up a pole in the middle of it, and I was originally gonna move the pole, and it's too expensive. So I said, well, I'll just give it to the homeowners and let them do what they wanna do. And they can make a park, or they can just leave it.
Could be maintained by the HOA.
Right, it's maintained by the homeowner association, so it'll be up to the homeowner association, whatever they wanna do with it.
Thanks, sir, appreciate that.
Make a motion to approve, subject to the staff comments.
A motion to approve, subject to the staff comment of the as-built. First, is there a second? Second, Mr. Anderson. Any additional discussion?
Commissioner Butler, is it possible to defer something in a situation like this until what would be contingent is met? So the next meeting we have next month, this could come before us again, and by that point in time, hopefully everything that Will's asking for is met, and that we can go ahead and approve it then. That way someone doesn't have to go back and check to make sure it actually gets done.
I think either way, somebody's probably gonna have to go back and check it's done, and in this instance, I think that the staff, we can feel comfortable telling the staff to handle that, because overall, we're going to count on his report back to us anyway.
Okay.
So in this instance, I think that it would be okay to leave into the staff's hands to try and prevent any delay.
Will, would that work for you? Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes, I don't like contingencies. I don't like them. I just don't. I'm probably going to vote against this tonight because there's a contingency. Contingencies means they may do it, they may not,
What's the contingency?
for the as-built.
No, he will do it. The only way it will get approved by the staff is if he presents an as-built to our staff, and the only way they'll be able to proceed forward
But we're gonna approve it tonight.
based off of that happening. And if that doesn't happen, then the staff will hold it and it won't progress.
It's just in the past, I've watched this body work too often and contingencies ended up being, we seen a thing where we thought it was a road gonna be built and it wasn't built. So these little contingencies, misunderstandings or whatever, I mean, I'm probably not gonna, my vote is not gonna keep it from passing or not passing, but I'm just saying, I don't like contingencies. I like things to be, they're ready to go when they get here.
Any additional comments? We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Smithson.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll move to item 6, conceptual improvement development plan, Fernville Springs Townhomes, Phase 2, 36 proposed units on 5.38 acres, property located along Fernville Road, tax map 42, part of parcel 63, RM 12 zoning district, property owned by McGehee Family Trust. We do have some staff comments. Mr. Jenkins, if you could read those in for me.
So, item 1 of 3, the blue line stream on the eastern portion of the property needs to be shown, along with an associated stream buffer, which may result in a loss of units. Item number 2, due to change in its orientation, the proposed townhouse in Phase 1 and located on the western side of Fernvale Springs Way, as it extends into the new site to the north, now encroaches into the required setback. Combining the two parcels would eliminate that issue. And item 3, the proposed internal roadway connection cannot be made unless changes are made to the plat of the first phase as recorded in Plat Book 49, page 96. Those changes will also require some changes to construction plans for the area where this approved development will be tying into the existing Fernvale Springs development.
Thank you, sir. So we do have a revised drawing tonight that's been given to us. Just to clarify, so that is an attempt to satisfy item 1? Okay, but still 2 and 3 are open? So if you could just tell us what you've done on this,
Let you get on with one of you. I'll be able to address two.
okay. Yes, sir, just if you could just explain to us what changed on that item 1 to satisfy where the blue line stream wasn't called out, now there's a buffer area.
What we did is we moved the units that were in the buffer area.
If you could just talk into the mic for me, please.
We moved them to the west, and I don't know if you have the drawings, but you can kind of see where there's a little jog out in the development of those units to avoid that buffer zone.
Okay, thank you, sir.
This right here, I believe.
And then 33 through 36 will move down.
Pardon me?
33 through 36 will move south.
They did just a little bit because we needed that extra room to the west of them.
Did you guys have a comment for item 2 or 3?
Can you read those two again, please?
Item 2 is due to changing its orientation, the proposed townhouse house in Phase 1 and located on the western side of Fernvale Springs Way as it extends into the new site of the north, now encroaches into the required setback. Combining these two parcels would eliminate that issue.
Yes, to answer that, to answer two, these will be combined. The Fernville Springs HOA, this next phase will become part of that and ultimately maintained by the HOA, so they will be combined.
Are those the units that moved south, or is that the 33 through 36? No.
What- Yes, they did move slightly south
That's
with
aren't
the
the ones that was
modification.
referenced.
They have nothing to do with items two.
Okay.
And to address number 3, the two buildings that's in question, the southernmost two buildings that's actually in the previously approved phased, they have been twisted 90 degrees. So there would need to be an amended, I'm assuming, site plan. And Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't be a final plat per se, it'd be a site plan.
No, it actually would be a revised final plat. It would revise for plat 4996, which created phase 1 with the individual units as fee simple, and then all the common area, parking lot, the open space. Since some of that's changing, it'll just be a revision to that. And if you put it all together, you could just have, you could do it in one plat. It would void and vacate the previous one. I think you would just, if there's an ownership issue, if the homeowners association owns any of the common area, if it's in their name from the first phase, they would just have to add a signature block.
And the HOA is on board with adding this phase. The second part of item number 3 is the construction plans. Of course, the only thing that we're really, by moving those two buildings, would be the actual taps that went to those buildings on their previously approved plat. There's no main sewer lines, there's no main water lines, electric lines. It's only the services that will get moved. So there's no main infrastructure that will be affected by moving those two buildings in the previously approved phase, which is actually units 11, 12, 13, and 14 on the previous approved Fernville Springs.
So how does staff feel about those two comments or rebuttal now? I know it's kind of working backwards. We just got this revised here. And you may have not had time to review like that buffer or, you know.
I mean, the revision that was received, now we're quiet. The revision that was received tonight was simply just slight shifting, of those, I guess, buildings 5 through 16 units 5 through 16 to the west. The layout of the plan didn't really change any, so it was really not, in my opinion, not a significant change from a review standpoint, or a layout standpoint. There are some complexities on how to handle those revisions to the existing phase that's in place. I think those can be worked through. It's just a matter of putting the mechanisms in place and making sure legally that the authority lies within the applicant to do that, and through the master deed and horizontal property regime establishment as a part of the initial phase. So, from at this stage, from a conceptual layout, stage, I think those things can and should be addressed as we move forward. But I don't think that they would have any great effect on the proposed layout. So, in my opinion, the layout that's proposed before you tonight can certainly be considered as the conceptual layout. And if you have any, thoughts on the actual layout, then, I think now's the time to, put those out there and see where we stand. Ultimately, this development could exist without that connection to the existing initial phase, if that was so desired by the applicant. So again, if that option completely goes off the rails and goes away, then this development could still exist without that connection. Although, as a staff, we would like to see that, just from a connectivity standpoint.
Any additional questions?
Will, so these drawings take care of all the concerns that you had in the staff comments, is that correct? Or have you had time to tell yet?
They acknowledge the staff comments. It's unclear as to if they have addressed them as a result of this just being a conceptual stage. So I'm comfortable with the acknowledgement from the applicant and then therefore addressing them as they come in the next stages. And my thought is, in a conceptual point, these are the types of discussions exactly that should occur, so that when the next submittal comes through, it's understood by the applicant and the planning commission and the staff that these items, need to have been addressed in a more defined manner at that next stage. So.
I just wanted to get a little bit more clear answer from you for our record.
Sure, absolutely.
Mr. Owen, the Fernvale Springs Way, that's the connector between the two phases, is that correct? The one at the south end there?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So would there be any issues if that didn't connect and there was only one road in and one road out for this area? I mean, we got 36 different townhomes here with one access point. Is there any safety issues with that or anything like that that we should know about?
As we've discussed previously on cul-de-sacs, there's a limit, I believe it's 24 lots as a maximum limit on cul-de-sacs. I do not think that the way that the language is constructed in the zoning ordinance, well, that regulation is actually in the subregs. So this, a townhome development that has a master deed for the entirety of the property with the exception of the units themselves would not explicitly fall under that requirement, but it is something you could consider. Yeah.
Okay.
No questions? You would like to make a motion? We have a motion for approval. We have a second, Mr. Powers. First and second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir. All right, move to item 7. Conceptual improvement / development plan, Otter Creek subdivision, Phase 1, Section 1, 16 proposed lots on 10.02 acres. Property located off of Old Nashville Road, tax map 42, part of parcel 79, R20 zoning district, property owned by Otter Creek Holdings LLC. We do have some staff comments. Mr. Jenkins, you can read them in for me, just one.
Yes, sir. The proposed sidewalk should be extended to the right-of-way of Old Nashville Road.
Thank you, sir. Could state your name for me, sir.
Richard Howes with SEC.
Thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions for the applicant, for staff?
It's hard to analyze this.
Kristen or Mr. Owen, on this comment, are we looking at the sidewalk, and we're just essentially saying that we want that sidewalk to extend to match up with the sidewalks on Old Nashville Road? To repeat the staff comments, it said the proposed sidewalk should be extended to the right-of-way of Old Nashville Road.
Right, if you look at where the internal road hits Old Nashville, the sidewalk that's shown just doesn't go all the way to Old Nashville Road.
It looks like
It's
it goes
just-
to the
it drops
stop
off-
sign.
It just drops off a little early.
Okay,
So it's just a small extension.
okay.
Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we still have some frontage on Old Nashville Highway, which is in the city, that could have some sidewalks that go to nowhere. But if you're planning on piecemealing them into the city until you get a full set, I think we're abandoning 50 feet or 100 feet of sidewalk that should be in there. I mean, you gotta start somewhere putting these sidewalks in. And in my opinion, if you continuously leave 60 feet or 90 feet because it's not much, or there's not a house on it, you're hurting yourself 20 years down the road, or 5 years down the road.
You can certainly ask that the applicant extend it the length of the frontage, like we did with Whispering Wind and several other subdivisions recently.
There's not a lot that fronts up there?
No, it's more of a side.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not an actual front.
Any additional questions?
Does lot 16 extend to Nashville Highway, Nashville Road?
Touches it it's about 20 foot wide.
That's 20 foot right there.
The sidewalk discussion has been ongoing, and I continually fight it back and forth as far as, you gotta start somewhere, you gotta start implementing it, and, you know, why not start today, and you'll have some interconnection happen. And then we voted one time, we added some sidewalks on a neighborhood, and every time I drive by it, I kinda cringe and go, why do we do that? So, it's hard to say, it's a continued battle of, but I agree with you, when, you know, you hate 10 years from now, go, I wish we would've had them. But then sometimes you look at it and go, I didn't really fit in that particular use.
I'm just back on, you know, if we're gonna have a policy, we ought to try to ride and complete it along with the policy.
Yeah.
If we continue to just leave the variance, then we're really just not honoring the policy that we've tried to establish. That's all I'm saying.
Is there any plans for Old Nashville width or anything? I know at one point we were there, now it's kind of changed, but there will be no improvements on Old Nashville currently planned?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Does the city actually own Old Nashville Road as opposed to
It
the
is-
other one, which was
That
owned
is
by
a
the
city road
county?
there, yep.
The only reason I brought that up, because it is a city road.
So, Ms. Costanzo, if we were to follow the regulation to the T, would the sidewalk continue up to kind of that weird point, just along Old Nashville Road to where that point ends?
It has been the practice, at least in the recent past, that I know they did for Brandenburg Cove, for Whispering Wind. Yeah, they had it go the length of the frontage. But you certainly have the jurisdiction to, make a defining point where you'd like to see it.
Cool.
If nothing else, that's a safe standing place for the kids that are catching the bus. They're not standing in a grassy ditch. They're standing on the sidewalk.
Cool.
And we get back to, if we ask Whispering Winds and these other places to do it, why are we gonna not ask somebody else? Is that a fair thing to ask one and not the other?
Whispering Winds connects directly to Cumberland Estates, so it was a continuation, it was a complete continuation of sidewalk, curb and gutter, the whole full improvement. So it definitely made sense in that instance.
I think typically, is it like a front of a lot? Typically, sometimes we'll have lots that face the main road connection.
True.
In most instances, I feel like that's what, usually they'll have lots out there. Any additional questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to defer until we get updated plans that have the sidewalk showing the extension around to the west of that lot 16 to wrap around about 20 feet or so to cover that frontage, and then to the northeast to cover the frontage of the property along Old Nashville Road.
So if this is a conceptual plan, we'll have construction plan come back. And so we could, since the construction plan will have to come back anyway to us, we could make that suggestion tonight and then see it on the next phase, on the next plan. Because it will be back in front of us. So the next time it comes in front of us, we could have the opportunity.
So considering it's a conceptual plan, I would like to go ahead and remove my motion, but then I'm not sure where to go from there.
You could call a motion to accept adding that the applicant add sidewalks onto the frontage of Old Nashville Road.
Okay. So
So moved.
I'd like to make that
So we have a
motion.
first, and I guess we want to include the staff comments for where they should be extended as well. You want to extend your motion to include that?
Yes, I would also like to extend my motion to include the staff comments.
All right, so we have a motion on the table for approval to include the staff comments of extending the proposed sidewalk out to the right-of-way on Old Nashville Road, and then to also extend the sidewalks onto the road frontage on Old Nashville Road of the property. That's the first.
Second.
We have a second? Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, sir. Powers was second. Correct? You second that? Yeah. All right, we'll move to item 8. Conceptual Improvement Development Plan, Otter Creek subdivision. Yeah, I was like, am I reading the same thing here? Yeah. Otter Creek subdivision, Phase 1, Section 2, 16 proposed lots, 10.09 acres, property located off Old Nashville Road, tax map 42, part of parcel 79, R20 zoning district, property owned by Otter Creek Holdings LLC. And no staff comments. Thank you, sir. Phase 1, Section 2 of that same, Mr. House still here. We have any questions for the applicant or for staff?
Sir, I'm sure that this is covered in another plat, but looking at the open space here behind lots 24, 26, 27, 29, and it looks like also behind 62, 112, and continues on down, how will that be accessed by the residents?
There is gaps in the lot lines when you get over into the further portion.
Okay.
We're waiting on annexation for that portion, and it will be brought back at that time.
Okay. I'm just making sure people aren't trying to, like, kids going down between other people's houses.
There's spots to go through there.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Any additional questions?
The termination of Winfrey Drive, does that eventually go into another road, or does that need a cul-de-sac right there so that a fire truck could turn around?
Winfrey being the one, because I'm having a hard time seeing it from here, that one, it goes into the property line, and it's less than 100 feet long. So we're not required to put one at that junction. If it were longer, more than one lot deep and longer, we would put one in.
So you just hope whoever's driving the fire truck can back up?
They're probably gonna turn, because there's gonna be the fire hydrant's gonna be on the corner anyway.
Any additional questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
A motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Slaughter first, Jenkins second. We have a motion to approve, a first and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. All right, item number 9, recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on proposed plan of services to accompany Resolution 717, a resolution calling for a public hearing on the proposed annexation of territory into the city of Fairview by owner consent, Tony Cavender, and approving a plan of services, 7818 Old Nashville Road, tax map 42, parcel 78. Some staff comments, Mr. Jenkins, you can read them in for me, please?
Sir. On February 15th, 2018, the Board of Commissioners voted favorably on a resolution calling for a public hearing on the proposed annexation of tax map 042, parcel 78.00, and known as 7818 Old Nashville Road. This resolution is accompanied by a plan of services which the Planning Commission is charged with reviewing and recommending back to the Board of Commissioners. The parcel in question is 103 acres and has access to Taylor Road. It is located directly south of the property known as Otter Creek Subdivision, Phase 1, items 7 and 8 above. The purpose of the annexation is for residential development. The parcel is also contained within the city's urban growth boundary, which makes it suitable for annexation. Should the property be annexed, it will come into the city as RS-40 per the regulations.
Thank you, sir. One just quick question is, now we'll have the new right-of-way to Taylor. Will Taylor have an annexation on that road at all down to that section or no? Doesn't look like it.
No, it's just, right, it's just that new strip that meets Taylor, but the portion from where the little new road meets Taylor up to where you see the county line, that section of Taylor will still be in the county.
Any additional questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
First, is there a second? Second, Ms. Qualls. First and second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll move to bonds, letters of credit. Item 10, Whispering Winds, request to set the bond amount. Staff comments per the attached bond breakdown from the city engineer. The recommended bond amount should be performance bond for all infrastructure, $567,000. And we have that breakdown. Any questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
First, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Powers. Any additional discussion?
To be clear, we're making a motion to approve the bond to be set at $567,000 for the performance bond for all infrastructure.
Correct. Would you like us to read that in our motion instead of just a motion to approve? Should we read the motion of the bond amount? Okay. So if you could rescind your second for me. Mr. Powers rescinds a second. Mr. Burks, if you'd like to amend.
I'll amend my motion to approve a performance bond in the amount of $567,000 for
Thank you, sir.
Whispering Winds.
Thank you, sir. We have a second.
I'll second that one too.
Powers seconds that. Any additional discussion? Thank you for clarification. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we will move to reports for discussion, information. City Planner, Ms. Costanza. Thank you. Mr. Owen, City Engineer,
Nothing tonight.
City Attorney. Thank you, sir. City Manager, Ms. Collins. Thank you, sir. Communication from the Planning Commission members, Ms. Slaughter.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Qualls. Mr. Anderson. Quick and easy. Mr. Powers. No, Mr. Powers. Mr. Calley.
Nothing tonight.
Commissioner Burks.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Jenkins.
Actually, we had discussed briefly tonight about the fact that we currently do not have in place as a city recreation fees and funds. We don't have sidewalk fees and funds. And I know that we're in the process of getting these regulations changed and fixed up. The recreation fee is mentioned in open space as an option for developers to pay in lieu of having open space. But it doesn't actually, there's no regulation that defines what a recreation fee is or anything like that. And this is something that I had discussed in email form today. I just wanted to make sure that we had an open discussion here and had a forum on just where we're at with that kind of process so that we do have options for us whenever we want to enforce our regulations. What do we do?
Discussed in the email back and forth, and I can appreciate that information being communicated because there's a lot of work to do in that. Obviously, within the subdivision regulations, it does state that you can assess the recreation fee. The difficulty is there's no recreation fee in the municipal code. As a part of that greater discussion, here's kind of my advice as it relates to the Planning Commission itself, which would be just simply not attempt to assess the recreation fee. The other opportunity you have is to remove the language of the recreation fee from the subdivision regulations. However, that may be a bit premature because you may in fact at some point have the recreation fee. As a practical matter, and let's assume for this purposes of this discussion, we're talking recreation fee. Here's the dilemma, and this is a very short discussion over a very long topic that we'd have to figure out. The issue with a recreation fee, if that's what we're going to use and go forward, a recreation fee would be similar to an impact fee or some other fee or whatever that would be. The primary questions are, how is it collected? Obviously, if there's a recreation fee on the municipal code and the Planning Commission has the ability to basically enact the recreation fee or assess it within the parameters in municipal code, then those funds are going to be remitted to the city, and they're going to have to be administered within the parameters of the municipal code for the recreation fee, of course. The difficult part then becomes, how does the city manage that? And when I say just not manage it, what projects can those dollars be used for? Is there a plan? Is it specific to the local area? As an example, there's been some discussion of recreation fees that would be applied to specific subdivisions, where I think some of you may have been a part of a subdivision where the discussion was there's not going to be an HOA. The developer is going to allow recreational space. They were willing to even donate that to the city, but then the problem becomes the management of that property. So within a subdivision, in that instance, the city would effectively become the HOA. You would have to have a business model specific to that subdivision so that you would be able to take that recreation fee and really fund what you wanted to do with it. So in that instance, it would be site-specific or development-specific. If you're talking about a subdivision that doesn't have recreational space or some other thing, and you're still going to assess that fee, then the city is going to have to ensure that they spend those dollars for recreation that would be accessible to anyone. Say you're going to make an improvement to the park, Bowie Park or the Veterans Lake or whatever the case is. So it's a little bit more lengthy discussion. I think it's healthy to leave that language within the subdivision regulations. Outside of that, I think the city, being the Board of Commissioners, needs to be able to develop some sort of plan for what that is and expect that. What we don't want to have happen is everyone be well-intentioned, have a recreation fee, adopt that fee, assess that fee, and then not be able to complete the projects or they're intended with those funds. That's the biggest threat. If we can do that from a budgetary standpoint, I think you can match the two together.
And for added clarity, two things. One, the why behind the question for me is that we do a really good job at allowing developers to come in here and have homes that add families and people to our community, but we don't do a good job, it seems like, at developing community itself. Does that make sense? So I've got a subdivision that I live in, and luckily I have a lot that's positioned in a way that I have a backyard that kind of adjoins the road, so I can have kids come over and play, you know, kickball or whatever they want to do in the backyard and have fun, right? When we have neighborhood parties and gatherings and things like that and little neighborhood festivals, we can do that in my backyard. Not everybody has that. If we would have had some sort of open space there that would have allowed us to meet as a community and for the kids to go and play and things like that, that would be much better in my eyes. Does that make sense? So it's the why behind the what. You know, regardless of the regulations and everything like that, I just believe that we need to start fostering community for our kids and our families. So that's number one. The other thing is I actually did a little bit of research today. So I called up the planning department in Spring Hill, and I called up the planning department in Franklin just to see what they do. Spring Hill's in the process. They don't even have an open space requirement in their regulations, so they're in the process of adding one. And then Franklin, they have an open space requirement, but they don't have a recreation fee because the open space requirement is mandatory and they don't allow variances. So every developer that comes before the board or the planning commission has to, like, you will put open space in there, and it will be used for, you know, recreational purposes, playgrounds, things like that. It's not an option. So if we're not going to have a recreation fee and we don't have the ability to maintain a recreation fee, we should at least have some, I'm trying to think of a politically correct word to say, have some teeth to be able to enforce and say, hey, you will have some open space and it will be used for families and children and recreation and things like that within that community that you're trying to create.
Sure, it's, we could go on all night. Part of the dilemma with all of those, and I'll try to be brief, is how do you strike that balance? Obviously, in your subdivision, if you were going to have an open space, then that's an expense that an HOA or someone's gonna have to manage. So as long as everyone goes in, understanding when I purchase my home, I'm gonna pay $100 or $50 or whatever the number is per month to do that, then you're gonna have to manage those things. So if you do that, then that's one opportunity for you to do. The flip side of that, and there are pluses and minuses for all those, there's some discussion, if we transition just a little from recreation to sidewalks, part of the discussion was tonight, when do we require them, when do we not require them? An example of how that mandate can go wrong is if you exit your subdivision and take Wiley Circle from the back of your subdivision back out to Cox Pike, the sidewalks that are there, you have vehicles parking across the sidewalks, where we've required sidewalks in a subdivision that didn't necessarily need sidewalks on that thing. So you could take the recreation fee, how does it fit the other? I think the mix of that is, if you're gonna have a sidewalk fee, you would assign it to where if we don't have sidewalks in this area, then the city can use those fees to improve sidewalks in other locations of the city where they would normally exist or be usable. The same thing with the recreation fee. I think if you're looking at growing the community and you don't have property that will be accessible to a recreation space, if you wanted to take those funds and earmark them to improve the playground at Bowie Nature Park or to improve a walking trail in some other location, I think you can. The devil's in the details.
And I agree to some degree. It's just, I'm not going to tell my daughter to hop on her bike and drive to Bowie, you know? Like, oh, you want to play? Well, look, old Bowie's, you know, got plenty of money there. Like, I would like something local near where I live for all of us. I think it's something we should have. It's a value.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I can just tell you there are pros and cons to both of those for how those work. Ultimately, it comes down to cost. If you're, again, we could be here all night, but if you're in your subdivision, you know, the prices of the homes escalated pretty quickly in there simply because of the lack of, I mean, the market is very lean with that. So again, you have to strike a balance and see what that is, how many acres, who owns it, who manages it, the cost. What do you want in there? There's been some discussion about, well, we do the standard gazebo in every one. You know, you see the same picture for every subdivision, no matter what subdivision it is, no matter where it is. So how you manage that as a part of that is not unreasonable. It's just gonna take some time to put together.
I think the application's gonna change too, like you mentioned, Franklin implements the open space. Franklin's also approving 4,000 square foot lots on PUDs. And so then they're saying, yeah, we need to require some open space, some amenities and things like that. So if you're larger lot sizes, if you have an acre lot or a half acre lot or so, maybe you say, now you have your yard to kind of play in or so. So there's different applications for different proposals too, or whatever, so. Good? Yes, sir?
When you're shopping for a home, as a builder nowadays, I mean, you got what you call starter homes, and when people are shopping for a home and they got X amount of dollars to spend, the loan amount's one thing, but they also look to see if there's a homeowner association fee or not, and the extent of that homeowner association fee for, what they're gonna get. And so, if you're a starter person or a lower income person, and you'd be more apt to look for a home in a subdivision that has either none or a very small homeowner association fee. With that, you're gonna accept the fact that you're not gonna have a bunch of fancy amenities at a subdivision at $100, $150 a month, the amenities that they will have. And that's just the way I think it always has been as you develop.
One other thing I would add, most of the subdivisions in Fairview do not have homeowners associations, or they may have at one point, but then they folded. And that's the problem you run into. You can say, okay, we're gonna have this rec field, and we're gonna have this other place for kids to go play, and the homeowners association will pay for it. As soon as that homeowners association is turned over to the homeowners, away from the builder, they can say, you know what, we don't wanna pay this anymore, this will fold, and now you have a field that grows up, and there's no way of maintaining it, no one has to, and you just have a blight in this area. So that's the other concern you have to take into consideration, because I don't think there's any way right now that we can force homeowners to have a homeowners association. At any time, they can dissolve it. When you see them stay in place is a community like Kingfield, not Kingfield,
Kingwood.
thank you, Kingwood. They have a pool. You have a nice amenity that people use. They're going to pay to keep that item up. Whereas you're not asking people to basically pay money to mow a field. They don't necessarily see the use in it, so that's one consideration to think about as well.
All right. Mr. Jenkins, got anything else?
No, I can't think of anything.
All right, perfect. Just quick thanks to the staff for all this information tonight. Thanks to the members, great discussion tonight. And then if we could, Mr. Owen, confirm April 6 o'clock workshop. You tell me. So 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock. That's good with everyone? All right, nothing further. I'll accept a motion to end meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved.